Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Well, there certainly wasn't a playbook for the pandemic when it comes to profits. If you watch CNBC or Fox Business, every time you look up, you see another company reporting just dismal earnings. To talk about that right now, Tony Guarnaccia, he is one of the leading authorities on digital marketing. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Pleasure to be here today.
Yes. Well, when we talk about profits, every ear perks up because that, without profits, you really don't have much of a company. What do you have to say to business owners right now who are just cringing looking at the numbers?
Right. Well, it's a difficult situation, but I think it's also a great opportunity. And so I think it's important to pivot when necessary and really leverage your resources. And what I mean by leverage resources, the resources really come into 3 areas. What are you doing with your time, your effort, and your money? And so one of the things you might want to think about is how you reallocate those for the new, current, and the future environment that we're going into.
One of the things that caused me to invite you is your backstory. I loved the story about you as a young man watching your parents just work their fingers to the bone. Tell us that story, Tony.
Yeah, so I grew up in small business. So my parents, they were fantastic bakers. They had a bakery and the best food you could possibly have. Unfortunately, they didn't know what they didn't know about growing a business. And so when I was 12, the business went out and we lost everything. And so I had to grow and I had to go to my sister's basement, basically, in her house. And so the 3 of us, my mother, my father, and my sister, lived there until we rebounded. And then after that, what we had to do is grow and kind of learn. And so I went to college to try to improve the situation. Because I always was an entrepreneur at heart. I said, okay, I'm going to go to college and learn what it takes to be successful. So I went there and I left college, started another business with my bakery. This time it was an online bakery, and we could mail cakes to the country. And these cakes were special because they're shippable, they wouldn't break, and also because we could put on top. I took these cakes and we had a lot of success. We won Best New Product at the New York Incentive Show. And then we all mail cakes to Jennifer Lopez, to Jay-Z, to a bunch of things, and also Fortune 500 companies. But then, unexpectedly, that business also failed. And so when I was newly married with a baby on the way, I'm homeless again. And this time, I was determined to go back and figure out what I had wrong, why that business did not have success, and how I ended up being homeless a second time in my life.
Wow. Well, I love that about you, Tony, because so many of these prophets have never suffered setbacks, and I think that's one of the reasons why your book, Small Steps to Grow Profits, is a bestseller. Give us at least one tip from the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing you want to look at is, I mentioned this a little bit before, but how are you leveraging your time, effort, and resources? And the first place I like to start is by defining your market. And so when I created what I call the results loop, it's the framework that any business can use to grow. You want to start with specifically defining who you're going after. I call that your market. That's the first step to growing your business.
And when you look back now at your father's struggle, what did he do wrong?
Well, the first thing you want to look at in a business is your profitability. And so a lot of times businesses will launch because they have a passion, which is fantastic. But you have to first understand really two drivers. Number one, your profitability. So how much money you're making. And number two, your cash flow. So when is that money coming in? And because we were inexperienced at business when I was growing up with the second business and with the initial business, those were really the death toll for that. We didn't take that into account. And so when I had left the second time losing that second business with my parents, I went on a new mission. I said, okay, I clearly don't know what I'm doing. I didn't learn what I needed to from college. So what can I do to kind of fix this? And so that's why I went on the second half of my journey in my life is to work with some of the best companies in the world. So that's exactly what I did. I went to work with Ford, with ADP. I worked with Google, and I took what I learned there, which were those principles, like how to run a profitable company, how to manage your cash flow. And then that became my new mission in life, where I am today, to teach small businesses what I learned from working with the best companies in the world.
And I think if the pandemic showed anything about America is how fragile the economy is. So many business owners are living basically paycheck to paycheck, and when they had to shut down, they just had no reserves. How important is it to have at least a rainy day fund?
Yeah, it's super important. You want to always have at least 3 months, and I think the pandemic is showing us much longer than that in reality. It's difficult to do that. Especially for small businesses, because the average small business, just like the average person in the United States at least, is living paycheck to paycheck. You're seeing the same thing with businesses. And so that's why the profitability is so important, because if you don't have enough margin in what you're selling, there's just not enough room to be profitable and really sustain yourself. So profitability, a lot of times people think profitability is a bad thing because you're greedy and you're trying to get all this money. In fact, profitability is kind of the lifeblood of keeping a business alive for when you have rainy days like we're all dealing with right now.
I love your Facebook page, because there's all kinds of great tips. We've got a little video of one of your recent videos. Tony, give us some other tips from your book. What should small business owners be thinking about right now?
Well, they should be thinking about how they're allocating that time, effort, and money. And so the first thing I would look at is the money, right? And so the first thing I did when this pandemic hit is reallocate where are my costs going, and seeing if I can reduce those costs, if I can renegotiate those costs. That was the first thing to look at. And then on the flip side of that, what revenue is coming in? So are there outstanding balances that are due to the company? Are there new opportunities for sales? Is there new niches you can go into? So in the framework I have of the time, effort, and money, I start with money in a situation like this, because you want to conserve money. You want to stretch what they call the runway. If you're a startup in Silicon Valley, they talk about runway, which is how much time you have to sustain yourself. And so what you want to do is, if you are in crisis mode, you want to stretch that out as far as possible. Whereas if you're in scaling mode and you want to grow quickly, you want to kind of accelerate things. So in that case, a lot of times you spend money quicker. But in this case, you want to really constrict what you're doing in terms of what's going out and maximize what's coming in.
Well, as a small business owner myself, I do a lot of entertaining. I usually will take somebody out to lunch. I might take them out for a happy hour. Sometimes I'm buying dinners. It was amazing to me to see how much money I was saving when I couldn't do any of those things. Do you think that was a wake-up call for a lot of entrepreneurs, Tony?
Absolutely. I think this was a shock to many of us, and I think people are still reeling from it and dealing with it. I live in the Northeast, and not too far from New York City, and so we're still pretty locked down. And I think it caused everyone to evaluate what they're doing, but also their future. So you don't want to just stop with these practices now, but you also want to consider, okay, what can I do in the future to be more conservative with my spending? But the bigger question is, what can I do to grow in the future? So how is this going to change? Because you're seeing all sorts of changes, because all of us are working remote now. Technology, thank God, has come along where we can do conferences like this. And so I think it's not just, how do we conserve, but, the question moving forward is, how are we going to grow in this new environment?
Well, you have a manifesto, and I want to put a picture of it up on the screen. Talk a little bit about that, Tony G. What made you write the manifesto?
Yeah, so the manifesto is kind of my opus to my life's work. And it starts off with the story of my mother, actually. So my mother is the inspiration behind the title. So she grew up during another time when there was a pandemic. It was polio. So in the late 30s and early 40s, this was affecting thousands upon thousands of children where they couldn't walk and even couldn't breathe. So they had essentially ventilators back then that were called iron lungs. And so she taught me growing up that in order to face any challenge, whether you're trying to do something great or if you're trying to face an adversity like we have here today, what you want to do is take small steps. And so what does that mean? That means, kind of looking at what you need to do, how you're going to do it, and then taking action, taking those small steps. And so I took that concept of small steps, what to do, how to do it, and taking action, and create a whole manifesto that shows how that applies to a business, especially in a business that's dealing with crisis right now.
Wow. Well, Tony, we're almost out of time. So final thoughts, and then please tell everybody how they can get your manifesto.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me here. It was a pleasure. I'm very passionate about small business because small business is the lifeblood of this country. But unfortunately, too many businesses are struggling. 80%, 90% of businesses fail within 10 years in this country. And so my thought was, what can we do about that? And that's why I wrote this manifesto to help small businesses learn what I learned after dealing with my adversity and then working with some of the very best companies in the world. And so to get that manifesto, it's absolutely free. There's no form to fill, nothing at all. All you go is to the website, smallstepsmanifesto.com, and you can download it, or you can go right from our main website for the book, which is smallstepsgrowprofits.com.
Outstanding. Tony G., you've been an amazing guest. We're going to have you back again soon.
Thank you so much.
You bet. And that's it for now. We'll see you next time.
Bye.